Welcome to another edition of PowerCore Productions and Podcastings. In today's video, we're going to be continuing Dragon Ball World's Strongest, What If Wonder Woman Was in Dragon Ball, Part 10. As always, if you're new to the channel, or if you're a regular and you like what we have to offer, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is PowerCore Productions and Podcasting that has to come out now and in the future. Now, before we get started in today's video, I do need to make one quick announcement as per the story. And that is that I made a huge mistake when it comes to the power scaling of a few characters in the previous video. If you'll remember, I may have boosted Chi-Chi up a little too high. The reason being is that I accidentally put a 0 where it shouldn't have been. That is on me. So in the beginning of the video, I am going to correct that mistake. So if any of you are asking in part 9 why Chi-Chi is so ridiculously strong, I was able to go over it real quick. I caught the mistake and I was able to fix everything up before you go into part 10. This is honestly one of the reasons why I have shied away from doing a Dragon Ball What If for so long, mainly because when it comes to power scaling and things of that nature, it's really tricky to deal with, especially when you get past the Saiyan and especially the Namek and Frieza saga, and then you get into the iffy territory of the Android saga and everything else that comes after that. But I was able to make the proper adjustments and fix them, so all in all, you should be able to follow along with the story a lot better going forward. But anyway, without further ado, let's get into today's video. So as always, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. So now, before we begin the story, let's do some quick cleanup when it comes to the power levels. First, when it comes to Chi-Chi, her official power level would be at around 800,000 or 18k. When she enters into her cheetah form, that would give her an increase of around 21k. As for Krillin, his power level would be the same as it was in canon. That was until he would meet with the Elder Guru, and he would be given his potential to be unlocked, increasing him to around 15k. From here is where our story would continue. While Chi-Chi and Krillin would be making their moves, attempting to make a strike back against Frieza and his forces, as well as against Vegeta, in hopes of getting their hands on at least a few more Dragon Balls, Vegeta would still be in for a tough fight, as in the original, Vegeta would still come into contact with Zarbon, and after Vegeta hid the Dragon Ball that he had in his possession, he would still be defeated by Zarbon after their first fight, as Zarbon was still stronger of the two of them once he entered into his monstrous form, resulting in Vegeta's capture and being taken back to Frieza's ship to be healed up before interrogation, as Frieza was not too keen on the fact that Vegeta had been making moves without his presence being known, and there was the possibility that he could have hidden a Dragon Ball. In the meantime, we would turn our attention over to the Sun family, Goku, Diana, and Gohan. They would be taking a specially made ship to Namek that would arrive in 6 days' time. This was the family's first time being together in well over a year, as Diana had been training in Otherworld and Goku had been training with Raditz, Chi-Chi, and Piccolo prior to the arrival of the Saiyans. Gohan in the meantime had been training on Themyscira with his grandmother Hippolyta, the queen of the Amazons. Now, this version of Gohan, as I've stated before, was raised a lot differently than Gohan from canon. This version of Gohan isn't too far different from his canon self, only he's a lot more confident and obviously he has training under his belt as well. The reason for this is that even though Diana wouldn't be as rigid as Chi-Chi would be as Gohan's mother, it doesn't mean that she didn't want Gohan to not learn anything. No, Gohan knows the basics. He knows how to read, write, do math, and he is learned in the world that he's in. After all, Diana has plenty of education in her own right. So Gohan's not an idiot, but at the same time, he wasn't raised to be a bookworm either. So now, with 6 days to train, how were they going to work things out? As they would leave for their trip, they would be given a bag of senzu beans. They would have 9 in total. The family had decided that they were going to use 6 of the 9 beans, and their training was going to be spread across 5 days. First, they were going to do 3 days of hard training. Afterwards, they would take a brief rest and take a senzu bean. Then, they would do 2 more days of intense training, and they would take another senzu bean. They would use the 6th and final day to simply rest their bodies and prepare their minds before they arrived in Namek. Going into their training arc, the power levels would be as follows. Diana's power level would be at around 10k, while Goku would be at 9k, and Gohan, even though he hadn't participated in any major fighting, was at a decent 1.1k. Now, the reason for Diana having a small increase in power is because the Amazons do have a high level of recovery from battles. Now granted, it's nothing nearly as insane as the Saiyans are. I would say that Diana's recovery, or a Zenkai if you want to call it that, is about 1/4 of what a Saiyan's is. So while Goku, as we know, gets stronger from every fight that he battles in, the same can be applied to Diana, but she only gets about 1/4 the increase. However, because of the Amazon's natural body structure, she's able to endure for longer periods of time. Goku's endurance just comes from sheer hard work and training, while Diana's is natural. The best way to describe these two from this point going forward is that Goku is a lot like a fire that you put gasoline on. It burns bright, very bright, but it also can flame out just as quickly. While Diana, she's more of a flame that's being kept up peacefully. It might not burn as bright, but there will still be a brightness to it, and it will also burn for a longer period of time. If Goku is fire with gasoline, Diana is fire with oil. The oil keeps the flame going, while the gasoline, while it increases the flame, it can burn it out just as quickly. This is the best way to describe the two of them, and it also plays into why Gohan is the way that he is in this story, a lot more than how he is in the original. Gohan being a mixture of both of his parents, and why Gohan's potential has always been so great, as he's a combination of the both of them. He's a fire that can burn bright and can burn long, which is why he's able to make the gains that he does. In total, the Sun family would spend their time training in around 100 times gravity, as gravity training was something that Diana wanted to bring to the family, as she had the chance to train in 10 times gravity while on King Kai's planet, and for Goku and Gohan, this would be their first experience. During their first 3 days, the gains that they made would be great. While Goku and Diana would spar and train together, Gohan would slowly start to catch up with the two of them. I also know that some of you are going to ask if Goku will learn the Kaioken, and the answer is no. Or at the very least, he can't learn it right now. The reason being is that they've only got 6 days till they get to Namek, and they're only going to be training for 5 of them. Now, I know that Goku is a prodigy and he's a genius in his own right, but keep in mind, it did take Goku some time to learn the Kaioken, so I'm not going to give it to him right off the bat. And in the end, this version of Goku wouldn't really want it. Kaioken is going to be Diana's own special thing. It's something that's almost tailor-made for her. Remember, in this universe, the Amazons were created by one of the Supreme Kais, one of the Kais that unfortunately lost their life to Kid Buu. Because of this origin in nature, the Amazons have a tie to the Kais themselves, And since Kaioken was created by King Kai, you could say that the move is almost tailor-made for her in this setting. While Goku, even without Kaioken, is able to make gains of his own, as well as Gohan. They would train and then rest, take their Senzu beans, and then they would do 2 more days of intense training before taking another Senzu bean to gain their gains before using the final day to rest. After the end of their training, as they would be making their way to Namek, Diana would have a power level of around 75,000. And with the use of Kaioken, her power would increase in the following ways. At Kaioken times 2, Diana would be able to use up to 1400,000. That would be her power level, and she can maintain Kaioken times 2 for 1 Earth hour. Kaioken times 3 would take her power level to 2100,000. She can maintain that form for 30 Earth minutes. Kaioken times 4 takes her power level to around 2800,000. She can maintain this form for 5 Earth minutes. Then finally, Kaioken times 5, which would increase her power level to around 350,000. And she can maintain this form for 2.5 Earth minutes, or 2.5 minutes total. As for Goku, he wouldn't be as strong as he was in canon, but still his power level would be decent enough, as he would be at around 70k in his base form. Keep in mind, this version of Goku doesn't have Kaioken, so 70k is around his max. And as for Gohan, he was able to make gains of his own, going from around 1.1 thousand to around 14,000. Now, you might think that that's not much for Gohan, but that's actually a great gain. And honestly, that's probably downplaying just how strong he could truly get under these settings. But I am trying to make sure that everything is kept in pace. Maybe if Gohan had pushed his training a little bit more, he might have been able to be gunning towards 20,000. But his parents always made sure to keep his health in mind as well. Even though Gohan was able to keep up some, he did find 100 times gravity to be very taxing on his body, and he benefited the most from 1 day's worth of rest. In the meantime, how would things be progressing on Namek? Well, the story would take a lot of major twists and turns, looking at the players involved. First, you have to consider that Chi-Chi and Krillin would be much stronger than the duo of Krillin and Gohan in the original story. Because of this, and with Chi-Chi's ability when it comes to speed and running, as well as her senses being heightened, she would be much better when it comes to getting away with the Dragon Ball that they have in their possession. Once Krillin has his potential unlocked, the team would have the 1-star Dragon Ball gifted to them by the Elder Namek Guru. In the meantime, Vegeta would manage to recover inside of the rejuvenating tank on Frieza's ship, and like in the original, he would cause a major distraction before blowing a hole in the ship and dispersing with the 5 Dragon Balls that Frieza had in his possessions before going off to hide. And because they had no scouters, as they had all been destroyed, and no one in Frieza's army, including Frieza himself, having the ability to be able to sense energy, they would be in a very tough predicament. Zarbon would still be sent after Vegeta, and Vegeta would still dispose of him rather easily. With the situation now growing dire and dire by the minute, Frieza would have no choice but to call the Ginyu Force like he did in the original. However, one change that occurs though is Vegeta when he's attempting to make his move. For one, there wouldn't be 6 Dragon Balls that Vegeta would have, and here's why. First, the Dragon Team would have the Dragon Radar, and second, the Dragon Ball that they had managed to take, they would still have. Unlike the one that they eventually ended up losing, now Krillin and Chi-Chi would both have a Dragon Ball. That would be 2 for them, and it would be 5 for Vegeta, with Frieza having lost all of the Dragon Balls he had collected when Vegeta managed to get one over on him. However, now Vegeta would be in a tough spot. Unlike in before where he managed to cross paths with Gohan, he wouldn't do so with Chi-Chi. although he would keenly become aware that there were others on the planet, and he would begin trying to sense and find their power levels. This would lead him into an ultimate game of cat and mouse, as he would begin searching all over trying to find where the last 2 Dragon Balls were, and since there wouldn't be any other villages for him to destroy, he would have a tough time doing so. This means that Vegeta would not be aware of the presence of the Earthlings all the way up till this point, which means that the situation only becomes a lot more worse when the Ginyu Force finally arrives, along with a new set of scouters. Of course, Vegeta would still sense the presence of the Ginyu Force. However, now things would be in a much more worser predicament because now he has no allies to bargain or to work with. Once the Ginyu Force arrived on Namek, this is where the story would pick up and would really start to change. Just as the Ginyu Force would arrive, they would hand Frieza a new scouter. Frieza would decide to become a bit more proactive and would still way off on the sidelines, although now he would be very keen on what was going on. In the meantime, the Ginyu Force would have to set out to try to find where Vegeta and where the Dragon Balls were, as well as figuring out who these other new beings on the scene were as well. Thankfully, Chi-Chi, Krillin, and Bulma had managed to keep themselves hidden, and they would still have the 2 Dragon Balls in their possession. Vegeta would find somewhere else to hide, along with his 5 Dragon Balls. However, now that the Ginyu Force are on planet Namek, he would have a lot more of a harder time than he did in the original. Now the Ginyu Force would have to come up with a plan, try to smoke Vegeta out. They knew that they would have a lot of searching to do, so they would split up, each member of the Ginyu Force going off in a different direction, knowing that if just one of them were able to run into Vegeta, then that's all it would take for them to have to find where he was and converge on the area. Vegeta, who had now gotten better at sensing power levels, would feel the 5 distinct powers moving in opposite directions from where Frieza's ship was. Frieza was still in place, meaning that he was staying where he was for now, while the 5 members of the Ginyu Force, Guldo, Ginyu, Recoome, Jace, and Berta, would all be moving in 5 different directions. Vegeta knew that if he played his cards right, he could potentially pick them off one by one. However, the only one that he could realistically take out was Guldo. But even still, if he could catch them off guard, then just maybe, he would wait. He would wait and let his cards play out in the right way. Vegeta would slowly leave his hiding spot, flying and making sure that he kept his power under the radar. It meant that he would have to travel a lot slower, but still, he had his targets in mind. The first one was Guldo. As Guldo was flying, his power level was only at around 10,000, the weakest of all of the Ginyu Force. And for his unfortunate luck, he would be caught off guard by Vegeta, who would appear behind him, his power level rising to its max for just a moment as he would cut off the small one's head. This small spike in power would be enough to be caught on the scouters by the Ginyu Force, as they were now aware where Vegeta was, as well as the sudden disappearance of the power level of Guldo. Because of this, they would be aware that Vegeta was now making his move. Now searching for him at top priority, Jace and Berta would be the first ones trying to converge on the scene, with Vegeta moving off to hide, although unfortunately, he wouldn't be able to get very far. Eventually, Jace and Berta would arrive, as they would find the body of Guldo, along with Recoome and Ginyu not too far after. But when they arrive and they see that Vegeta is nowhere in sight, they soon come to realize that Vegeta was going to be using guerrilla warfare-like tactics, trying to pick them off one by one. They would become a bit worried. However, Ginyu would assure them that if Vegeta had to resort to something like this, and that he went after the weakest of them first, then it means that Vegeta must know that his power level isn't nearly strong enough to contend with the rest of them. So then it was decided, instead of traveling all alone, they would work in pairs of 2. That meant if Vegeta wanted to try this little stunt again, then it wouldn't work in his favor. Jeice and Berta would leave as a team, with Recoome and Ginyu making the other team. Now the situation was a lot more dire. With 2 pairs of the Ginyus running around in either place of the planet, it meant that Vegeta was running out of options. It would be suicide to try to take on either one, because if he did so, not only would he be outnumbered, but he would be very outpowered. However, as Vegeta was contemplating his next move, he would see something moving in the distance. Someone who was running at top speed. It took him a moment to see who it was, but eventually he got a good look. It was that woman. That woman that was with Radix on Earth. The Earthlings were here? What on earth could she be? The Dragon Balls. Keeping his power concealed, Vegeta would chase after Chi-Chi. Chi-Chi was not fully aware of Vegeta's presence, as he was keeping his power level low as well. Eventually, he would catch up to her, hitting her with a shoulder tackle and knocking her over into a side of rubble. As she got out, she would now see that Vegeta had caught up to her. Well, it seems as though the cockroaches of Earth do know how to scramble to the far corners of the galaxy. That's funny coming from you. We sensed that little stunt you pulled. You picked on the weakest power level you could find. Shut your mouth, woman! What was that? Look, I don't have time. I think we both know why we're here. Yeah? And what's it to you? You're trying to find the other Dragon Balls. I take it you and your crew have the last 2, don't you? Chi-Chi said nothing, and Vegeta took that as confirmation. Well, I have the last 5. And just so you know, you're looking in the wrong direction. What's your game, Vegeta? Well, you're in a no-win situation. Tell me, is Kakarot with you? And his woman? No. First off, it's Goku. And he and Diana, they aren't even here yet, but they're coming. And they'll be a lot stronger than you are. I won't lose to them again. But we don't have time. Right now the Ginyu Force is making their move, and if we don't act soon, we're going to be in for a world of trouble. The Ginyu Force? They're an elite group that were hired by Frieza. There's no time to go into details. The only thing I know right now is that it's going to take all hands on deck if we're going to be able to beat them. So, who is with you? Knowing that she wouldn't have any choice but to say so, she would tell that the only person with her were Krillin and Bulma. Vegeta had no idea who Bulma was, just some random Earth woman. But it was just her and the bald brat? They were the only ones that came? Granted, Radix and the Namekian and that small fry was dead, but for one, what was taking Kakarot and this other woman so long to get here? And weren't there more that could have come with them? They must not have healed in time. But no matter. After getting a small estimate of what their power could be, then it just might work in their favor. If they worked together and launched an all-out attack, then they might have enough power to deal some real damage. Vegeta's current power level was at around 24,000. Chi-Chi at full power was around 21,000, and Krillin was a good 15,000 added. He didn't like this. He didn't like the idea at all, especially the idea of them having to try to pick off their prey one at a time. But this was going to be the best outcome. So, I propose an alliance. In exchange for your 2 Dragon Balls, I'll help you survive this. You think we're just going to give up the Dragon Balls so easily? No. I think we can work together, but we don't have to give each other anything. And what do you mean by that? Simple. I can get word over to my ally to come here and help us. That way, you won't have any way of knowing exactly where we are. Is that a fact? When this is all over, you know we'll have to settle the score eventually. I look forward to it. I still owe you for what you did to Radix. Oh please, that weakling has no business. He's not a weakling. Radix is far more stronger and far more noble than you will ever be. You're not even in his league. Is that a fact? Well, no matter. If you're going to call your ally, then do so now. Chi-Chi, using a small communicator that she had on her, and thankfully was still in range, would tell Krillin the situation. She didn't have to explain why it was important that he keep his power level concealed, as to not give away his location and Vegeta potentially tracking them back. Knowing what needed to be done, Krillin would nod in understanding, as he would leave the 2 Dragon Balls with Dende and Bulma. He was sent out faintly where Chi-Chi and Vegeta were, before dropping his power level to as low as possible before leaving. Once he felt as though he had enough distance, he would pick it up just a little bit to rendezvous with the other 2. Now that they had all gathered together, it was now time to launch their counter. Of course, it was time to decide though who they were going to go after, which pair of the Ginyu Force. All of them were powerful and all were dangerous in their own right. But until Goku, Diana, and Gohan arrived, they were just going to have to make do with what they had for now. Vegeta was able to pick up on the power levels just by sensing them, and he was able to get a good feel of who was with who. Ultimately, he determined that Chase was with Berta, and Recoome was with Ginyu. The pairs were looking on Namek, and they had moved to the farthest corners of the planet as possible. At least they were separated enough that if fighting were to start, even at top speed, they would have a little window of time before they could all rendezvous together. So what's the plan gonna be? Krillin would ask. Our best bet is to go after the pair that we can jump first. If we can surprise them and get the ball rolling, we might just be able to stand a chance. What? You mean we're just going to have to jump them and hope for the best? Obviously. We can't beat any of them one-on-one. It'd be suicide. Even as a pair, any pair of them would still have us far outclassed. But if we go at it at full power, if we catch them off guard when they're not looking, then I think we just might be able to take them out. At least one pair at a time. And what about this Frieza guy? I imagine as the situation gets more dire, Frieza may try to get involved. In all likelihood, they've probably brought him a new scouter, which means we're going to have to be quick about this. If Frieza gets involved, it's the end of the line for everyone. Okay then, Chi-Chi would ask. Who are we going after first then? Recoome and Ginyu, or Jace and Berta? After thinking it over for a moment, Vegeta would decide who they were going to take on. With their powers combined, Recoome and Ginyu would simply just be too much. But with Jace and Berta, at least they were somewhat manageable, at least as they could take out one. Of course, if they found out they were coming, the 2 fastest beings in the universe, as they claimed to be, then it would be all over. Once the game plan was decided, Chi-Chi, Krillin, and Vegeta would make their move. As they waited in an area where the two were going to be coming from, all three would get into position, lowering their power levels to almost absolute zero to make sure that they would be completely undetected. As the Ginyu Force would continue their search for Vegeta and the Dragon Balls, with the Sun family now only just a short time away from Namek, the fight and the race for the Dragon Balls was entering into a critical juncture, as now the counter against the Ginyu Force was about to go into bloom. This concludes Dragon Ball World's Strongest. What if Wonder Woman was in Dragon Ball Part 10? As always, if you enjoyed today's video and everything else that we have to offer, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is PowerCore Productions and Podcasting that has to come out now and in the future. Stay tuned for tomorrow's video as we continue Neon Genesis Evangelion Redemption. What if Shinji went back in time? Book 1, Part 10. But anyway, that's going to do it for the end of today's video. I'm Javon Harrington with PowerCore Productions and Podcastings. Signing off, and I'll see you next time.